I'm Trevor Williams with Global Georgia, and we are here with Ambassador Michael Wood, the former U.S. Ambassador to Sweden. Mr. Wood, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
You mentioned a little bit in your speech just a few minutes ago about how the U.S. is kind of waking up to the reality of climate change and alternative fuels and the need for action on those fronts. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant by that?
Yeah, I arrived in Sweden in summer of 2006. Spent almost 3 years there. And at that time, there was a growing concern in the U.S. about climate change, but it was not a major factor. Then the Nicholas Stern's report about investments that should be made to address climate change came out in the fall of that year. The Al Gore movie came out. And all of a sudden, by the end of that year, it seemed that everybody in Europe and increasingly in the U.S. was identifying climate change as a serious problem that we needed to do something about. So one of the things in talking to the president about what he wanted me to work on when I was in Sweden, he had great confidence in alternative energy, but thought that the U.S. was behind. And so he said, I bet the Swedes are ahead of us. They have great engineers, they have great inventors, they have this green ethic that's part of their soul. I bet they're ahead of us. Why don't you go and learn what you can about alternative energy? So sort of capturing the waking up in the U.S. That occurred in the end of 2006, and given that assignment by President Bush, I began to concentrate on enabling cooperation between the U.S. and Sweden in alternative energy. And we had terrific success with dozens of examples and somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to $200 million worth of investment or business transactions that were enabled as a result of my work.
Has viability in this sector in the U.S. been a problem of sorts, and how has that been changing?
Yes, the problem is most simply described by the fact that alternative fuels are more expensive than the ones we use now. So the reason we use so much coal to produce electricity is it's abundant and it's very cheap. It costs, depending on how you do the math, roughly 4 cents a kilowatt hour to produce electricity from coal. It costs 12 cents a kilowatt hour to produce electricity from the sun. Maybe 7 cents per kilowatt hour to produce it from wind. So solar and wind are coming down. They used to be $1 per kilowatt hour. Now they're 12 and 7 cents. So that's great progress. But they're still more expensive than coal. So if you're running a power plant and you're under pressure to produce electricity and deliver it inexpensively to your customers in Georgia, coal looks attractive. And so the emphasis on technology is that's the answer for driving down the costs of these alternatives. Great progress has been made, and great progress will, I think, continue to be made. The other difference is if there is a cap and trade system in the U.S. as they have in Europe, or if there is a carbon tax or some sort of price on carbon, that would make coal a little more expensive than 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and that would bring the other alternatives closer to a break-even proposition. So those are some of the economic dynamics behind the move into renewable sources of energy.
You mentioned in your remarks that President Bush may have been a little bit misunderstood in Europe, at least on the issue of climate change and the issue of alternative energy. Can you talk about what he did and then the transition to President Obama?
Yeah, well, if you look at the record, it's clear that President Bush got us onto the ramp of the highway headed towards alternative energy technology. But as I said earlier, it's also true that Obama has now moved us into the passing lane by magnifying and accelerating some of the things. But Bush did get us started. I asked people if they can identify the state in the country where the most electricity is created from wind, and most people will say California or maybe somewhere in the Midwest like Minnesota, but in fact it's Texas. And this is primarily because of programs that George Bush put in place when he was governor of Texas in the 90s that created incentives and inducements for people to develop wind turbines and create electricity from the wind, such that not only is Texas #1 state in the U.S., but it also produces twice as much wind energy as Denmark, which is famous for its large amount of electricity produced from wind. So the president has always been enthusiastic about alternative energy, as demonstrated by his governor experience with wind. As president, he was a great champion for ethanol and other alternative fuels for cars, cellulosic ethanol from wood, which is a huge opportunity for the state of Georgia because of the forests that exist in this state. The Energy Act of 2005 and 2007 were very important acts which established mandates for alternative fuels, efficiency standards for government-owned buildings. Even our embassy in Sweden was under an obligation to reduce its energy use and lower its carbon footprint as a result of the Energy Act of 2007. So President Bush did a lot in this area, but clearly now with the stimulus package and Obama's green jobs, we're moving into the passing lane, and we'll see even more in the next several years.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to be here.